the date in which I filed and announced that I was running was really a strategic decision. I've been planning to run for some time. That was just kind of my way to try to get a leg up on the competition, as it were. Growing up in this neighborhood, this place means an awful lot to me. I've lived here since 1977. I went to Lafayette, Madison, West Seattle is where I graduated from. I also attended Chief Sealth High School. I've worked at Concord Elementary School in South Park. I've worked at Denny. This entire area just means an awful lot to me. First job I ever got out of college was at Roadway Express, which is in South Park. I've been spending an awful lot of time on my couch for the past 2 decades, frankly, yelling at the TV and the radio about why are things the way that they are? Why haven't things been changed? And so when they made the change for city council to the district system, it allowed me the opportunity to get up off of my butt and go try to do something myself.
And what specifically are the things, if you, let's say, you take office tomorrow, is there a specific legislative agenda or proposal that you would like to, go forward with first before anything else?
So one of my top priorities will be getting into the budget. I am heartily dissatisfied as a West Seattle resident, leave the campaign out of it. I'm heartily dissatisfied with the way that taxes and levies are put upon us every time a fire truck needs fixed. We need a new road. We need crosswalk paint, as is the case now. There's a $930 million levy on the board, and what we get for that is, frankly, crosswalk paint, some school signage, and a couple other very small things that I don't think will have a dramatic effect on our community as a whole. That's a great example of it. I'd like to see our resources that we already have, the $4 billion Seattle budget, I'd like to see that spent in a way that is more reflective and equitable throughout our city, and I don't think that that's been the case. I think that our school system, frankly, for the community that we live in, is an embarrassment nationally. I've worked in our schools. I've seen teachers who don't have any resources to do what they need to get done. They have some of the largest class sizes in the country. Again, I think that that's embarrassing. Our transportation system, our frequent transit service location in the West Seattle Junction, those are the exact same bus stops that I caught the bus at when I was in middle school. I think that it's ludicrous that we would do all this building, we would allow people breaks in terms of the parking that they would build, and then we wouldn't focus any money on building, increasing traffic or bus public transportation infrastructure here. I think that with the viaduct closure coming first and then the tunnel toll after that, I think the fact that the city has neglected to give us any significant public transportation increases or traffic mitigation of any kind to deal with the tunnel viaduct mess that's looming, I think is frankly negligent on their part, to say the least. I think that someone needs to say, what are we going to do when the tunnel opens and they begin charging a $5 toll each way and all of the traffic shifts to I-5 in the same way that we've seen it happen on 520 and I-90? The fact that the city does not have a plan for that, or they have not spoken to that at any time, makes me feel a little weird. Like, it makes me feel like someone needs to say something, and I'm happy to be that person. The fact that we're talking about taking traffic away from 35th Avenue, taking traffic capacity away. The fact that we're talking about removing parking from Admiral Way. I live on Admiral. I've attended Admiral Neighborhood Association meetings on multiple occasions where, frankly, the Admiral neighbors are up in arms about them removing the parking. I don't know if you've been down Admiral lately, but almost every single house has a yard sign in it that says no to that. They don't want that, but somehow, some way, it's still being foisted upon us. And I think that in the past, that's been what we've done as a city. Folks from outside of the community come in, they look at an actuarial table or they look at some computer program, and then they make an arbitrary decision when they have really no idea what's going on in the actual community where they're looking to make the changes. I think that taking traffic capacity away from any of our roads at this point, I think that taking parking capacity away from any of our roads at this point is backwards thinking. I think that we need to be building the West Seattle and the South Park, the District 1 that we want to live in the future. It'd be great if one lane on 35th Avenue was enough, but frankly, one lane wasn't enough when there was just the little green bridge down instead of the West Seattle bridge that we have now, and I don't think that that's going to address the needs moving forward. Someone needs to say, let's build the city for the future, not the city for the past. I want to be that someone.
Well, I've been covering both of those projects pretty extensively, and for example, 35th Southwest, the project manager is a West Seattleite who takes 35th every day. I wonder, though, if you don't like what SDOT is proposing currently, what are your thoughts about making it safer, or do you disagree with SDOT's belief that there's a safety issue on roads like that in Admiral?
Having looked at the numbers, I don't think that it's an especially dangerous road. Do people get hurt on 35th Avenue? Absolutely. Is that sad? Absolutely. Do I want to make it as safe as possible? Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, though, we live in a large and growing city. So if we want to continue to get around our large and growing city, we're going to have the road capacity to do so. We also have one single lane that goes to I-5 over the West Seattle Freeway. I don't know whose thought process it is that that's going to work when the tunnel is tolling at $5 or the entire thing, no viaduct, no tunnel, is closed for 18 months or 2 years. And that's what they say now. Look at the time that they've already promised us it was going to take compared to what it's actually going to take. If they say that we're going to need to use side streets for 18 months or 2 years while they complete the tunnel once they get it started again, that could very well mushroom into 4 years. That's going to crush West Seattle in terms of property values. When the word gets out that for the next 4 years it's going to take you 2 hours to get to anything on the other side of the West Seattle Freeway, property values are not going to spike because of that. They're likely to be negatively affected. Folks, commutes, people that have lived here for decades, all of a sudden they can't get off the island. People that take the bus, forget it. If the bus situation is bad now, it's not going to do anything but be worse then. So again, I think that I certainly respect the Seattle Department of Transportation's want to make roads as safe as possible, but safety cannot, it absolutely cannot be the only concern. And as I hear people from the Seattle Department of Transportation talk, that seems to be their main point. We're concerned with safety. Well, we could build cars out of rubber and make them go 3 miles an hour and no one would ever get killed by a car. But I don't think you would ever hear anyone proposing that either because it's not realistic. In my view, eliminating traffic capacity, taking away traffic capacity, taking away parking capacity is tantamount to that same idea. It's not realistic in the city that we live in.
So you mentioned housing values, and of course today, and I'm sure you probably haven't had the time, the mayor came out with his announcement on affordable housing, which last week was, of course, a leaked document about single-family homes, and we were kind of curious what your reaction to that has been so far.
The mayor's office has an extremely unique, from my perspective, point of view on affordable housing in that somehow by allowing builders to not build parking, that's going to result in affordable housing. And looking at the West Seattle Junction as a small example of that, I can't help but notice that the facts don't bear out the argument that the mayor's office has made. We have some of the most expensive apartments in the entire district in the West Seattle Junction. There's MFTE apartments in the West Seattle Junction that are supposed to be low-income housing. Frankly, I just moved to a new apartment out here. When I looked at the MFTE places, I make $20,000 too much a year to live in MFTE housing, and frankly, their rents are about 20% too high for me to feel comfortable paying. And so what I couldn't figure out is, how is it that someone that makes 25-30% more than the maximum income requirement is uncomfortable paying that rent, but people are supposed to be calling that affordable housing? It doesn't make sense. And so I think the argument that allowing builders to build buildings without parking is somehow going to lead to affordable housing, frankly, I think that that's ludicrous. Second to that, I also think that the idea that if we dramatically limit the amount of parking that we have in our community, somehow, some way, all of the cars that people drive are going to magically disappear. What we're going to end up with is a situation very much like this weekend, where we had the West Seattle Street Fair, and people that come to West Seattle, they come to spend money, they come to participate with the community, they come to meet people in their neighborhood, community members come together, small business owners flourish, people come out to that. Well, when it takes you 25 minutes to park and you grew up in the neighborhood, I know where the secret parking places are. I know where there's a cut-in behind here. There might be an alley spot here. I know where that stuff is. It still took me longer to park here than it took me to park at the Yankees game with my mom 4 weeks ago. To me, that's unsustainable. And that's just the way that it is. And so when we talk about taking parking away from folks, it doesn't make any sense. And so I think that a lot of the mayor's ideas on how we move forward as a community in terms of parking, in terms of affordable housing, I just don't think the facts support the thought process behind them thinking that those programs are going to be successful.
One of the things about transportation and trying to get out of here, 2 hours in the morning if, the viaduct comes down, all that, is I wonder if you have ever had any thoughts about how we could possibly get more jobs here in West Seattle so that not so many people would have to leave. Because the problem is that everybody has to leave. We're like a bedroom community over here.
Absolutely. That's a great question, and I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about that. So one thing that I think that the city council person that's elected from our district can do is being an ambassador for the neighborhood. Spent a lot of time in South Park specifically talking to folks down there, and one thing that they say is we want it to be safer. We want a bank in our community because, if, as you may know, in the entire area of South Park, there's not a single bank. They have a small grocery store. It's basically a food desert. And so one of the things that we talk about when I'm in South Park is economic development. And so what I'd like to do is be an ambassador for parts South Park. Hey, prices on property are really expensive in West Seattle right now. The density is really high. What if you took a look at South Park? In West Seattle, same thing. If you want to open a technology company, something with a high margin, let's be honest, if you have a low margin business, if you're doing scrap metal, you're not going to be able to locate that facility in the heart of West Seattle. The property's just too expensive. The economics wouldn't make sense. But there are going to be certain industries that would work here. Software companies, startups, video game folks, things I haven't thought of yet. There's certainly a room for that here with commercial retail space available. So I would love to be an ambassador for the community, and I really think that that's part of what I bring to the table. Having grown up here, regardless of whether or not I win the election, regardless of the outcome of the election, I will always love West Seattle. West Seattle will always be a place that's near and dear to my heart. My campaign is entirely self-funded. I haven't collected a dime from anyone. I'm not beholden to any industry. I'm not beholden to any voters group. I'm not beholden to any voters association. This is me trying to represent our community as best as I can by working with the folks within the community.
Why did you decide to do it that way?
I think it's important. I do. I think that it's important. I think that political financing has gotten to a point to where I hear some of my competitors championing programs that, frankly, as I walk around the community, as I was today talking to voters just don't agree with a lot of the things that the Seattle Department of Transportation is trying to do. Voters don't agree with some of the things that the mayor's office is trying to push through. Now, I believe that our mayor has done some great things in his time as mayor. I support our mayor. I just think that some of his plans need a tweak here and there, and some of his plans need to be scrapped and started over. And such as what we were just talking about, the affordable housing. I don't agree with the parking situation in the affordable housing. As I talk to people around here, our neighbors from where we sit right now, they're not upset, they're not perturbed, they're irate about the parking situation in the West Seattle Junction. That's a microcosm of what the mayor's office is trying to do in the entire city. So if someone wants to know if that idea works, they can come to the West Seattle Junction and they can ask anyone, what do you think about the way that parking's been done in West Seattle? And they'll tell them it's abysmal. That's something that you'll hear to a person, door to door to door. No one thinks it works.
What one needs a tweak?
I think the idea of working to increase the number of affordable housing units, I think that that's an excellent goal. I love that path. I just think that we need to find a different route to get where we're going.
Now, what they announced today involved a big, complicated agreement that involves inclusionary housing, where developers will have to make a certain percentage of units affordable in buildings, and beyond the MFTE, which you mentioned. But they also said that they're going to extend the MFTE, which was otherwise going to expire this year. Do you think, having mentioned, looking at how that shook out, has that been a program worth extending, or if you were in council, would you scrap it?
The MFTE plan doesn't work as it's structured now. The rents are too high and the maximum incomes are too low. I don't know who they're renting those apartments to, but frankly, if you make $40,000 a year and you're paying $1,700 a month in rent and bills, either you have a secondary source of income that's off the books, you have a bunch of money sitting in the bank, or you didn't do the math right before you moved in. Because if you make $40,000 a year and you're paying that, it should be crushing you. It should be difficult for you to buy food based on those numbers. And there's a period at the end of that sentence. It shouldn't work for anyone unless somehow, some way, they happen to be independently wealthy. Which, if you were that, why would you want to live in a one-bedroom apartment that was 465 square feet? It just doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you what else, when we talk about building here, I'll tell you another thing that doesn't work for me as a lifelong resident in this community. The fact that we're building buildings with 180 square foot shoebox apartments that folk can live in, they're calling them cutely micro units. That sounds cute. Well, my fear is that what we're doing in West Seattle is we're building a transient community. And what I mean by that is we're building a place to where someone fresh out of college or someone fresh to the neighborhood is going to move into one of these apartments. They're going to set up shop. They're going to meet a new boyfriend. They're going to make friends in the community. They're going to get a dog. They're going to have a baby, and then they're going to move. And so what that means is we have a whole bunch of buildings right up here where we're never going to have a community. What we're for all intents and purposes, what we're creating is large, fancy, extended stay hotel type situations where it's never the same people and it's always different. I don't think that's going to benefit our community in the long run. And so I'm concerned about issues like that, and I want to make them change.
Do you think that there's really any chance that, for example, the parking situation could be overturned? Because, for example, that was in the mayor's plan again today about loosening the restrictions even further so that even more buildings could have less parking or no parking required.
So part of the reason why our neighbors would want to vote for me is I will stand and shout that we have to change that. It's just going in the wrong way. Builders, bear in mind that I don't believe that it's the builders that are taking advantage of the city. I think that the builders are working within the framework that we've laid out for them. That's our fault. At the end of the day, that comes back to the voter. It's definitely the people that are legislating the rules. It's definitely their fault because it passed on their watch. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with us as the voters. So if we're not happy with the rules around parking, if we're not happy with the rules around affordable housing, if we're not happy with the rules around public transportation or transit in general from our area, then it's incumbent upon us to stand up. My mom took me to the voting booth when I was 9 years old, and she voted for Booth Gardner. I was inside the voting booth. My mom closed the curtain and she did her thing, and I thought it was amazing. Since I've been 9 years old, I've been involved in the political process. The first president I voted for was Bill Clinton. I'm not ashamed to say that. And I was ecstatic to have voted for a president at 18 years old. It was one of the biggest things that I did in that year. And so if people want to see things different, then come on in. The water's fine. Let's make a change. And that's primarily why I'm running.
It's interesting you mentioned that because we took our kid to the voting booth at age 1.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, which leads me to ask, this is kind of a side note, but what do you think about how voting by mail has turned out?
So, voting by mail is tricky for me, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I understand that it's cheaper and it frees up resources that the city and the state can spend in other areas, which I'm big on. I'm a proponent of. You've heard me talk about the budget already. I'm a proponent of doing things efficiently. I like that. However, the vote-by-mail system disenfranchised me personally for no less than 3 or 4 votes because when they switched to the vote-by-mail, one of the things that they do is they verify your signature from your voter registration card. Well, here's the cool thing about that. Because voting has always been so important, this is a full circle story here. Because voting has always been so important to me, I got my voter's registration card when I was 18 years old. Consequently, my signature, believe it or not, the S in Rushmer, I actually made a dollar sign. Why? Because I was a teenager. And so then 15 years later, when I send in my ballot to vote for President Barack Obama, they turn me down. They say, oh, well, your signature doesn't match. Here's another one. Sign it again and we'll make it right. So I signed it again. Same thing. Well, now you have to come see us. I said, wait a minute. How can my signature, I only have one signature. How can it not match? Well, when I finally went out to Renton to find out, I saw my signature. It was literally 18, 19 years old. And so there's going to be all sorts of folks that have similar stories, whether they moved and didn't get their ballot in time, they didn't change their mailing address with the post office, or their signature doesn't match because it's 20 years old, or a whole slew of other reasons. What we end up with, the most vulnerable members of our community, the folks who don't own a house and stay there for years and years and years, they end up being disenfranchised. I don't have a fix for that off the top of my head because we are strapped for cash and we do need a ton of different things in the city. When we talk about transportation and all of the other issues, there's no money for any of that. We talk about the schools. Our state legislature just kicked the school initiative right down the road again just 2 days ago, and it's embarrassing. And so I'm not advocating spending additional millions of dollars to go back to the old system, but I do think that we need to find a better, faster, more efficient way to involve people that have been disenfranchised through the mail-in ballot system. And I do feel like there's a large enough group of those people that it merits some look.
I got one of mine thrown out. Same thing, signature. Just did the T a different way. You got back to mentioning schools, which is something I wanted to ask you about,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
it's something we hear as a high priority in some of the forums where we've seen you.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
mentioned that you've worked in the schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us more about what you've done.
So I was a volunteer basketball coach at Concord Elementary School. That was the time of my life. During the summertime, they do a program. I don't know if they're still doing it, but years ago they had a program at Concord Elementary School where during the summer kids could go to the school and basically, lack of a better term, it was just a fancy daycare where they could do things other than just kind of sit in a room. So one of the things was basketball. That was an activity that they had. I volunteered to be the basketball coach. It was ran through the YMCA, and we taught kids how to play basketball. And really, taught is probably a little strong. They were elementary school kids. We ran around. We shot the basketball. We kept them from fighting, and we tried to build some sort of semblance of teamwork. When I worked at Denny Middle School, I helped run the MSSP program, which has since changed names, but at the time it was Middle School Student Success Program. There's an extra S in there, but I think maybe they were thinking middle school should only get one S. Anyways, Middle School Student Success Program, what that was they took 3 individuals, myself and 2 other gentlemen, and they made a list of all of the at-risk youth in the school. So anyone who was having trouble passing, anyone that was attendance issues, anyone that was behavior issues in class, anyone that wasn't routinely doing their homework, they broke the 200 kids, it was about 200 or so. They broke that list up between the 3 of us, and we each got a caseload of 1/3 of that. At that point, it was our responsibility to build lesson plans for the kids so that we could move through each quarter and try to, the main goal of the program was actually to increase their WASL test scores when the WASL was still in effect. And so the main goal was improve WASL test scores. But we looked at it, the 3 of us who were actually doing the work, we looked at it as not just WASL test scores. We want to improve their school performance overall. We want to make them better students. We want to make them better friends. We want to make them better teammates to their classmates, etc. And so we built out a lesson plan individualized for each individual student that we had. We would work with the parents, the administration, the teachers, so that the kids knew that they had a support system. Maybe you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't be shocked to know the number of kids that we have in our system right now who truly feel like they're on their own. We have kids whose parents do not care about their report cards. Don't bring it to me. I don't want to see it. I'm busy doing other things. Some of that is negligence. Some of that is just because sometimes it's awfully hard to put food on your table when you're a single parent, for example. My mom was a single mother. She raised me by herself. There were lots of times during the 80s when jobs were scarce and my mom was on unemployment. Those were some of the toughest times of my life, and certainly the same can be said for my mom. So I'm by no means trying to beat up parents. Sometimes it takes so much to feed and clothe the kids that you just don't have anything left in the tank. And so the program that I was a part of at Denny really was about building a support system for the kids and letting them know that, hey, it's not just you. We're here to help. There were kids, we took up, as an administrator, we took up fundraising to get kids clothes and deodorant, backpacks, socks, underwear, because some kids wouldn't come to school strictly because they were being made fun of because they were wearing the same clothes for the past 2 weeks. And growing up, I know exactly what that's like. I was made fun of in 4th grade for wearing the same clothes 3, 4, 5 days at a time simply because that's all that was available. So when I see stuff like that, it makes me want to change things. And so when I worked at Denny, that's what I did. Part of me running now, I realized when I went to school in West Seattle growing up, the school system was not great. Things haven't gotten better. My education, I was lucky enough, I have a big brother, big sisters through the King County Big Brother, Big Sisters program. My big brother graduated from Harvard. My big brother was an executive at Microsoft. My big brother was a vice president at Yahoo. I hit the lottery with my big brother. He's a great guy, and he's helped shape me into the man that I am today. I went to college out of high school because my brother went to college. It was important to me. My brother got a marketing degree. I got a marketing degree because education was important to him, and he instilled that into me. Had I not done that, my life would be dramatically different from where it is today. Education truly saved my life. And so in an area as prosperous as the region that we live in now, if you travel around the country, I've been fortunate enough, I've been in about 25 of the 50 states in our union. If you travel around this country, it's not like Seattle almost anywhere. Our economy is raging compared to what it is in most parts of the country. And so we're extraordinarily blessed to live in a prosperous community where there's jobs. They might not always be the right job, but there's a foot in the door job somewhere in our community right now. With the minimum wage being raised, they're even paying more now. The minimum wage now, by the way, is higher than what I made with my first job out of college, which is that's just another indication of the prosperous region that we live in. And so not only the prosperity, but being around the technology companies that we're around, the great companies in our area, it is disheartening and embarrassing that we have some of the largest class sizes in the country, and that our legislature, frankly, hasn't done anything to address that issue. And so one of the things that I've been campaigning on heavily, as you mentioned before, is I'm willing, should I be elected, to go out to folks myself and panhandle if I have to Microsofts, to the Amazons, to the Starbucks, you guys, to the Boeings. You guys have great jobs on offer right now. Oftentimes you have trouble filling these great jobs. What if you donated a couple bucks to some programs that we have out here? The TEALS program is a great example that they run out of Chief Sealth. That's technology, education, and learning in schools, right? I went up to the school and I talked to Aida Fraser-Hammer, who's the principal there. And we talked about that program. They get computer engineers, software engineers to come into the classroom and actually work hands-on with the kids. What a great program. So kids know early on in high school, I can do this, I can go to college, I can get a degree, and I can get a job. 23 years old, I can be making 80, 100 grand a year, living the life I've always wanted to live, doing something that I think is fun. So should I be elected, my plan is to go to these companies and say, hey, we need to improve upon these programs, we need more funding, we need it now, help. Not a mandatory thing, not a new tax, not a new levy, just going out and getting folks that are interested in making things better for our kids today, getting them involved. I think that if I can get some of those conversations as a city council person, I think that I'll get a lot of traction down that road. I'll give you
Just devil's advocate question.
Go ahead.
You know, the school boards are all in this election cycle. Why city council instead of the school board? School board would seem more direct, hands-on, and to that point.
It's a great question, but the schools aren't all I want to fix. There's a long list of things that I want to fix. Schools are one of those things. I'm upset about the tax levy, the budget decisions that we talked about before. I think that transportation and transit need help right now. I think our schools need advocacy. I think that there's a whole host of issues that need tackling right now, and I believe that the Seattle City Council is the best way that I can address the broadest range of issues. And one more thing before we leave from the school thing, one thing that I did want to touch upon. So when the school district allowed the AP program to begin at Chief Sealth, that was about 2 years ago-ish, the school district told the principal that you can advertise and market the AP program, but we're not going to give you any budget. Not $1, not a penny. So when I talked to Ms. Fraser-Hammer, the principal at Chief Sealth, she said that they didn't even have books for the AP program. So I asked her, because she told me that she made a way. She found the money, somehow, some way, beg, borrow, steal, rob. She got the money to buy the books. So I says to her, Ms. Fraser-Hammer, how much did those books cost? $6,000. We roadblocked an AP program in a school where parents in the neighborhood are already sending their kids elsewhere because it's stigmatized already. So we tell them they can open an AP program. We don't give them any money, and $6,000 is all it took to put books in the classrooms. That's the kind of thing to where if Bill Gates or the Melinda Gates Foundation gives me $100,000 or $1 million or Amazon gives us $50,000, if we can get books for $6,000, that's a start. I'll come up with the $6,000 myself if we have to. I'm not willing to see roadblocks like that stopping our kids from being successful in the future, and that's one of the things that got me off of my butt and into this race.
So are you in favor of the city taking a little more of a leadership role with the schools? There's even been some talk that maybe the mayor should be able to appoint some school board members.
I think that at this point, I would be willing to entertain any plan that was talking about putting more legitimate resources into our school system. It's been too long. I don't know, frankly, I don't know how legislators at this point, state legislators, can live with themselves based upon the way that they've done our education system. I'll tell you frankly, and I think that this is something that everyone knows and we just don't talk about it much. If you live in Seattle and you have money, your kids don't go to public school. It's not an option. It's not on the table. It's not something that we talk about. If we have money, it's a given our kids are going to private school. I can't say enough. In a community as prosperous as ours, they sold a 2-bedroom apartment. I live on Admiral. They sold a 2-bedroom townhouse across the street from my house, 1,300 square feet, for $780,000. That's an apartment. If people in our community are buying virtually $1 million apartments, a little bigger than 1,000 square feet, we should be able to send our kids to our own public schools, which, by the way, the folks that are paying for private school are still paying for the public schools about $10,000 per student, and we're not getting the results that we need. It's abysmal, it's embarrassing, and I mean to see a change as far as that goes.
That's you mentioned that people aren't talking enough about that issue. Anything else that you think you wish was getting discussed more in this campaign in this year? Things that just don't come up as much as you wish that they would.
It's a great question, and you hit on it with the schools. I really do think the schools is the main one. I will say the problems in West Seattle at this point are pretty well known. As I talk to voters, it's the same thing over and over and over again. We need help getting off of West Seattle. We need parking help. We need affordable housing help. I think that we all know the main points. And that's what I'm hearing from voters. I don't have one up my sleeve that's, hey, look at this one too outside of the schools. The school issue is really one that, based on my experience having worked in the schools and because I value education to the degree that I do, that was the one where I really said, a lot of people told me when I started this campaign, a lot of people told me, well, as a city council person, you're not going to have a lot of sway there. Maybe you should leave that issue alone. And that was one of those things where I really put my foot down and said, you know what, because I know what I'm talking about in this area, I really feel comfortable making a stand on that, and that's what I've been doing.
I have, I was going to ask my closing question. Anything else came up with you? Okay.
Nope.
We've asked everybody if, so you're talking to somebody and they just look you flat out in the eyes and they say, well, I'm voting for, and they name somebody else in the race. Mm-hmm. What is the case you then make to them to say, here's why, here's what I can offer, that's the reason you should vote for me instead? It's
a great question. So, from what I've been told, there are front runners in our District 1 race. Our District 1 front runners have an extraordinary amount of experience in city politics, in local politics, and some folks think that's a good thing. Frankly, I disagree. I think that if you have 17 years or 20 years working in local politics, and I'm a resident, let's forget a minute that I'm campaigning, and I'm a resident, the first thing that I'm going to ask is, well, what have you done for West Seattle? What have you done for this district? What have you done to try to improve the community around us? And knowing that not very much of anything has been done in District 1 to improve any of the issues that we've been talking about for the last half hour, I think that that's a really tricky sell when you get into the nuts and bolts of the situation. And so my response to someone that says I'm voting for one of the front runners perhaps or one of my competitors is take a look at the stances that they support. When you hear someone in District 1 that's actively supporting the move levy, take a look at the move levy. I have it printed out at the house. I need to bring it to the candidate forum that's the day after tomorrow because people keep misquoting, some of my competitors keep misquoting what West Seattle and South Park are getting out of the move levy. I would challenge any voter in our district to take a look at the move levy and decide on their own, on the merits of the levy, if they think that that's a good idea for our community. So when you hear people championing ideas like that, championing the ideas that the mayor has about affordable housing or about parking, when we know as a practical matter they just don't make sense for our community, that leads me to believe that there may be other agendas there. Same thing goes with the funding, completely self-financed. When I hear folks support things that frankly don't benefit our community, it makes me wonder if they're not beholden to certain groups. Not saying that that's the case, but I think that in my case, it's clear and obvious. I've been here my entire life. I'm not going anywhere. I've dedicated a substantial sum of my personal resources to make this happen. I don't have a large organization. When I said I was on a campaign walk, I do my campaign walks by myself. The main reason being, I want to make that connection with every single voter. I could send an army of teenagers throughout our community to hang door knocker tabs and walk off. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. My goal, I hope that you're home. I don't want to boom and then walk away. I hope that I can engage a voter in a conversation and learn more about what's important to our community so that I can sharpen my own game when it comes to making sure that I'm actually representing our community, our voters, and issues that matter to us here in District 1. If elected, I will certainly spend a large amount of my time fighting for issues that benefit the entire city of Seattle. But make no mistake about it, I'm running to champion issues that are important to West Seattle and South Park first. That's what I'm doing here, and that's my plan.